Welcome everybody to the recap of the WWE brand split from last night's SmackDown. Totally crazy, and we're going to talk all about it on the three-man power trip. It's your host, Kevin, with my two buddies here. It is Puvin and Mike. How you doing, guys?
The real life unicorn, and you can't teach that.
I am here, I'm excited, and I'm actually just really angry at the internet today after the colossal reaction of last night.
What do you mean?
Well, we'll get into it, but the internet just overreacted like crazy last night. If anything that you read, and I'll share that I had some extra time because I'm between positions right now and starting up something next week, but I basically really got into following the draft and following a bunch of different websites and some reviews and whatnot, and the number of people who are basically saying that Raw is a juggernaut and SmackDown is a swap meet is kind of ridiculous. So we'll talk about it more, but basically this is me telling the internet you're stupid.
The marks, man, the marks.
Apparently.
Well, what's the point of being a mark if you don't let everyone else know about it, man?
That's true.
Can't blame the internet.
That's true.
Okay, so now we know that Puvin is very upset about the internet. So last night, big show went down. There are a few, obviously there were a few matches that went on, but nobody really cared about that. Instead, it was the first, well, not the first draft, but it was the draft of this brand split in this year. So we had some pretty big picks happening and some really surprising non-picks go down. Overall, how are you two feeling about it?
Well, I would say initially I kind of felt like I hadn't sat down and watched something and been that disappointed since I saw X-Men Origins Wolverine. Like, what was that? But after taking some time to analyze it, it is it's not as bad as I initially thought so.
Oh yeah? Okay. What about you, Pavin?
Yeah, I'll say, I mean, whether it be a casual viewer or not, the way that the draft was structured, Raw was going to rack up top star talent when we did our mock draft. And every mock draft I looked at, when they announced after that every two picks Raw gets three, there's no way to do it without Raw kind of starting to pull people quickly and really bringing in strong caliber folks. But I think that SmackDown held its own, and I think that they did something very interesting where the storyline almost followed that Raw was beating up on SmackDown, but then at the end, I think SmackDown actually picked a lot of people up to help strengthen it, and I think that there's a lot of things that people are glossing over when it comes to SmackDown. The big thing that I'll say, and we'll talk about a bunch of this, is that if you look at the mid-card talent between the two shows, it's very clear to me that, yes, Raw has a lot of strong mid-carders, but what SmackDown has is a bunch of mid-carders who are still very hungry and kind of angry that they're not higher on the show. You have Dolph Ziggler, you have Del Rio, The Miz, Zack Ryder, and so, yes, the other mid-carder is stronger. It also has way more people and is way more overexposed, and so I think that SmackDown's mid-card is going to get angry, and that's going to make for some great television.
I think they also have a lot of room to breathe, unlike with the Raw roster, because like you said, like not everybody's gonna get filled in that, man. So I think it's a kind of the case of like if you go to like a Golden Corral and they be like, oh my God, there's all this food I gotta put on my plate. Yeah, well, after you eat so much, what happens? Your eyes start getting bigger than your belly, right? I think that's what happened.
Yeah, I'll also say that we've talked about how we all work in higher ed, and I went a little crazy on my analysis of this thing. So we had like a rubric and some grading, and I even went so far as to figure out the grade point average of both shows in terms of their picks. And so Raw is slightly stronger, but SmackDown is much closer than I think a lot of the folks who are basically saying Raw is the juggernaut are really aware of.
Okay. Well, hearing all that, I mean, I'm going to interject my opinion at the end of this, but I think it's only fair to everyone out there. If for some reason you didn't see the draft and you didn't read it online or anything, let's try to go through some of the picks, or all the picks that went down. Now, only some of these were actually done on live TV. Everything else was after that on WWE Network, trying to get your $9.99 worth. But let's go through and try to do it in bunches. Because last night on TV, they did it in chunks of 5, basically. Because I was a little confused beforehand how they're going to do the whole Raw gets 3, SmackDown gets 2 thing. And
You weren't the only one, bro.
yeah, it actually worked out pretty well because they did one chunk, then a match, and then like another chunk and a match, that kind of thing. So, without further ado, they started off Raw. The number 1 overall pick was Seth Rollins. Talk about redesign, reclaim, rebuild. That's a really bold move for a guy that came back from a very long injury vacation. Now, next one for SmackDown, the champion, Dean Ambrose. Pretty good pick, I'd say, considering he has the gold. Raw's next pick, Charlotte, the women's champion. This one was personally a surprise for me, but it went down. SmackDown with the next pick, they had AJ Styles. And then Raw, to finish it out, took Finn Balor from NXT in the first round. Now, in the second round, we had John Cena for SmackDown. Or Roman Reigns for Raw first, I apologize. Then John Cena in SmackDown. Then Brock Lesnar for Raw. Bray Wyatt for SmackDown. And then to finish it off for Raw, it was the New Day. And then I'm going to do one more chunk to finish it off for this round, then we'll start talking about it. It started off where Raw was Sami Zayn. Then it went to Bray Wyatt, then Becky Lynch for SmackDown again. Sami Zayn for Raw. Or did I just say that?
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's all
basically,
good, bro.
Basically, for this chunk, sorry, the paper I'm reading off of, it's chunked really odd. Basically, Raw ended up with Sami Zayn, Sasha Banks, and Chris Jericho. And then SmackDown ended up with Becky Lynch and The Miz with Maurice. So, not too bad of picks for the first 3 rounds or so, I'd say. Not surprised that all these people were picked. Possibly just the order in which they were picked was shocking. There was really one omission that was shocking for me, but from those 3, from those 3 chunks, who was probably the biggest omission that you all didn't see coming, and who do you think was the most dead-on value pick? What are you thinking over here, Mike?
Well, for me, the value pick, honestly, probably have to go with SmackDown with John Cena. I mean, like where they got him and like what he's probably going to bring to that brand. I would say Cena was probably the best value pick.
It's true, he was number 7.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he got great value there, and then I think the spot on pick honestly was Balor. Like I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, like picking him being in the top 5 and from being NXT basically just put the stamp on this is the future, this is the guy. So those are my 2 things.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I have a lot of thoughts on this. I think if there's an omission that surprised me, I think it's that Kevin Owens didn't go in the Sami Zayn spot.
Agreed.
And the thing and this is part of the reason why I think I became so irritated with a lot of the responses and things I was seeing, was that people needed to remember this is not the NFL draft or any kind of legitimate sports draft.
Mel Kiper was not present.
Exactly. This is a draft with a fictional executive group. And so, yes, Bayley, Shinsuke, name a couple other NXT talents, Samoa Joe, they are all merchandise drawing acts. They are all very much ready for the mainstream and the main roster. However, they are not going to go. I still think that Bayley comes up as the surprise partner, but it is not a slap in anyone's face that they were not drafted. The fact that the Miz and Rusev went so early does not mean that they're necessarily valued higher than some of the folks who come up after them. It means that in the world of WWE, those mid-card titles mean something, and the longer you go without drafting them, the harder it is for them to explain why they're relevant. So that's why they went so early. In terms of a value pick, so to speak, I think the one that I'm going to say is, Kevin, did you say Bray Wyatt in the top 15?
I did. I actually think I said it twice, but I did.
Okay. I just want to make sure. I think that he's going to be a steal of the draft. I think that the fact that he went to SmackDown gives him a lot of potential I think that he's immediately going to be slated to work with one of the top 5 in terms of the main eventers. I'm going to agree with Finn Balor being right on the money, and I think that Raw now has the potential to position him in a way to where he automatically is relevant. And so I would not be surprised to see him come in and immediately feud, possibly with Seth Rollins or Chris Jericho, to help set up his first feud. Also knowing that the club is obviously on Raw, and so they can linger with that as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
Now, for me to dive in here a little bit as to what I think for those 2 different picks, value pick, actually, Mike ended up stealing my thunder on that one. I think John Cena by far. I mean, it's got to be Cena.
Absolutely, bro.
He's been the face forever at this point, and he's inevitably going to break that championship record. And they got him the 7th overall pick. I mean, that's just, what can you say? That's awesome. Now, funny enough, the pick that I thought it felt out of place. Now, looking at the list, maybe it doesn't seem that way, but as soon as it was picked, I was like, really? Bray Wyatt that high, huh? I was like, I just didn't see it coming. He's not champion. Everything he's in, it doesn't work anymore, especially at the disastrous stint with against the New Day. That what was that? That video package, it was horrible. And I just didn't get yeah, I just didn't get it. Like, for me, maybe it's because I was bitter. I thought Sasha should have won at that pick, considering they needed a female talent. But I don't know.
I mean, bro, like, go ahead, Bubba.
I'm going to say that I think that while I agree that Bray Wyatt hasn't always been handled the best, I think that it's very clear that the audience likes him. More than ever, you hear an outcry of why isn't Wyatt winning? His merchandise does well. His segments tend to be watched, and that's even with inconsistent booking. And so I think that there's still very clearly an investment in him. I think the other thing is that they very much positioned themselves as the new era last night. I mean, look at the top 5 picks again. It was Rollins, Ambrose, Finn Balor was up there, Charlotte, and then there's the one other one that I'm missing here, AJ Styles. All went before John Cena, Randy Orton, Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
That very clearly sends a message that they are embracing this new era, and it's not to say the other ones aren't valuable, but they very clearly sent a message.
And I agree with that. I guess I was disappointed in this whole deal when I admit I wanted the 2 different brands to have kind of different feels to some degree, and I was really hoping that one of them would have maybe more NXT guys and focus more kind of on the younger crowd, whereas like the other brand could be built up by the old faces and kind of the old horses of the company. And now, obviously, there would have to be a mix of some young guys in there too, but I don't know. I guess I was just disappointed that it didn't see, like, for example, SmackDown ended up with American Alpha. I was kind of hoping that they would end up on whatever brand had all the best like tag team matchups. Like, I didn't want Enzo and Cass on one and then American Alpha on the other. I would have liked them together.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I'm gonna jump in here. So what I like is that Becky on SmackDown. Granted, the rest of the women's wrestlers on the roster, I think they're potentially they could be good, but that's still yet to be determined. But I think being on SmackDown is going to help her because now she can actually get kind of showcased, because before being on Raw, which she's definitely gonna be play second fiddle to the Boss and to Charlotte, and so like I think being on SmackDown is definitely going to help her. But at the same time, I think that's probably what's going to potentially like hurt people like Paige and Cesaro and people like that, because they're just going to be lost in the shuffle of the mid card. I don't really see them going like anywhere either.
So I have so many things to say right now. I want to go back to firstly what Kevin said, which is the brand that's kind of highlighted by NXT, which I can see kind of what you're saying, but SmackDown is very clearly the face of new wrestlers right now. They took 4 of the 6 NXT talents. They also ended up getting a number of the NXT talents that basically were draftees because they came up after WrestleMania and they didn't do anything with them. So I think that SmackDown is very clearly it's almost NXT light at this point, and I don't mean that in any disrespect. I'm actually excited to see how that works out for him. I think the other thing is I just said that the first 5 picks were a clear message that it's a new era. On the flip side, if you want to talk about messages, Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns very clearly got a message that these doping allegations have hurt them. It is nowhere. I mean, from what I saw periodically looking around, it seemed pretty clear that Brock Lesnar was going to be the overall #1 pick until this doping stuff came out. Roman Reigns, you cannot tell me, would not have been in the top 5 if this suspension hadn't happened. And then going back to what Mike was saying here with the women, I'm very happy with how the women's division played out. I think that they still need to answer the question of whether that title is going to be able to float or not. The only thing that I would have changed is I would have sent Paige to SmackDown and Naomi to Raw, because I think that it would have added more depth to SmackDown, because there's really only 2 established folks. Naomi is established with the audience, but is still kind of young in her in-ring work, so to speak, with the audience. But that's the only change. I think that they did a really good job of breaking up the women. And I actually think that while Raw has Charlotte and Sasha, it is very green besides Paige with them. I think Summer Rae has some opportunities. There's basically Nia and Dana Brooke are going to be learning quite a bit as that plays out for the women on Raw.
Well, I'm going to say that, I mean, I guess so, that it was split up for the most part okay, but for me, it's such a clear win for Raw. But I'm also a really big fan of Paige, and, you know, Charlotte and Sasha Banks speak for themselves. Well, actually, Charlotte doesn't, in my opinion. I think Charlotte sucks. I mean, I know she's very good. I know she's very good in the ring, but I think she's so boring. She gets to wear her father's peacock suit, and then that makes her great. I don't know, but I do think Raw ends up winning that one pretty handily. But at the same time, I can at least concede. I think that there is definitely potential with SmackDown 2 to be up to par for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say similar. I think probably was touching on it a little bit either. I think also what can help SmackDown is once we figure out what's going on with these like belts. You know what I'm saying? So I think like if let's say because the Miz is over there, so you can have people like Apollo Crews and Ryder and Ziggler and people like that. Could we have all this like basically like program where everybody's gunning for like the Intercontinental title. That'll help establish some folks versus like I think over in Raw where it's just kind of overstuffed again. You know what I'm saying? So like, and then I would say too, at least SmackDown seems like it has the potential for all these new rivalries. So Orton's back, so Orton and AJ could be like a great matchup. But then like on the flip side with Raw, like how many like Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn are great, but like after a while, like I'm like, this is like the 100th time we've seen this match. Can we have another rivalry, please? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Mm. But the thing, I agree with, like, I actually agree with you quite a bit. I like the idea that there's a new possibility for different rivalries. Although I have to admit, when I saw that Baron Corbin and Dolph Ziggler were drafted together, I said, "Oh God, not again!"
Yeah.
They're not going to stay together very long.
I hope not, because Baron Corbin is terrible as far as, like, he's not interesting so far. They've not done a good job at that. And I love Dolph Ziggler, but he constantly loses. So I'm glad, but I do agree. Going all the way back to the beginning of the show, there's great potential to start new things. I mean, The Miz, Ziggler, I like Kalisto even, Zack Ryder, and hopefully
keep him off the mic.
Kalisto is horrible.
Keep him away from the mic.
You know what? We're gonna talk about that a little bit. I don't want to get into it, but right now, because I think after we get done the draft, I think we have to talk about how many awkward and interesting interviews there were during the draft. So we'll get into that for a few minutes as well. But the general split up, I think, generally well. It seems like Raw may have possibly won, but not to drag on any longer about this, speaking in generalities, Pavin did go through all of the picks, and he ended up making a pretty nice rubric to kind of judge and grade how each brand did in this draft. So it would be great if we could go through those and try to see exactly what we all gave as 4 grades. Now, for example, we had the titles breakdown. We're like, okay, which one got more wrestlers with titles to add and gold to add to their trophy case? Now, I'm going to hold my grade to the end because I've been talking a lot, but first I'm going to kick it to Puvin. I'm going to say, what grade did you give Raw for the titles?
So truthfully, that was a category that I didn't end up grading, and it was because we still don't know so much. There's the Cruiserweight division that's coming to Raw, and so there's an assumption that there's a title coming with that. But do they crown a champion now? Do they wait till the Cruiserweight Classic is over? It's one of the things that I think that they might have jumped the gun on in announcing, because they're not supposed to crown a champion or a winner of the Cruiserweight Classic till, I think, September. And so what do you do with that division now, or is it just kind of an impending announcement? There's the U.S. champion that ends up on Raw, the tag team titles, and the women all end up there. Again, the question becomes, with the tag title and the women's championship, are they brand exclusives? Will there be SmackDown equivalents? I think the other thing, and this is more of a battleground foreshadowing thing, is I would not be surprised to see the IC Championship and the U.S. Championship flip-flop on that show, so that there's a moment where it's possible where SmackDown only has the World Championship for a couple of minutes during the show, and you get this very intentional moment with the GMs where it's like, oh my god, Raw might get all of the championships before the end of the night, and then we see the flip-flop. I don't necessarily know if they'll do it because that involves putting the title on Zack Ryder, which I don't know if they'll do, but I think it's a fun thing they could play with.
Mm. Well, yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of potential there. I think, they have unanswered questions that we won't know yet until the pay-per-view comes up. But I would say, which leaves a lot of intrigue, which is good. But at the same time, it doesn't leave a lot of, I would say, room for error. So they better get it right.
Absolutely. Okay, so you know what? I threw out a grade there, but there's no actual grading that could be done there other than just counting, I guess.
Yeah.
But, okay, so we'll start at the top. What was first really announced when it comes down to it, which was the commissioners and general managers. So that means for the two, we have Raw, that has Stephanie McMahon and Mick Foley, and then we have SmackDown, which is Shane McMahon and Daniel Bryan. So, Mike, what do you give as far as grades go for these pairings?
I would give Raw an A-, and I would give SmackDown an A.
Okay, so A- and A. Okay, I just have to ask, why the slight ding on Raw as opposed to SmackDown?
Well, because I could potentially seeing those two actually feuding, because clearly Foley's a face, clearly Steph's the heel. Can those two really coexist in the way they've been doing? I don't know. So I could see, them being some friction there, and then that impacting the storylines versus, I think Shane's clearly the face and Bryan's always going to be the face. So that was the reasoning behind that for me.
Okay, pretty good reasoning. What about you, Pavin?
Interestingly, I gave Raw an A- and SmackDown a B. And so I think the reason why I did one of those is exactly what Mike was describing. I actually like the fact that Raw has a heel and face dynamic. I think that it's actually going to make for some interesting television. Not that I want them to focus on it too much. I think that both executive groups, so to speak, did a good job of presenting a competitive fighter, which is important. The other reason why I dinged SmackDown has to do with what I've been reading, and it's just that nobody really knows how long Shane is supposed to stay around. And so the fact that he's taken this on-air role, I don't think he's just going to be like, peace, but I think that that's a looming picture of how much are they going to invest in Shane if they still haven't really signed a contract or anything in terms of on-air pieces. Stephanie is a part of the corporate structure. Shane is not. And so I don't it's hard to ding them on that, but I just don't know if Shane's going to stay around.
That's an extremely good point.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to read off mine and prepare to flip a table because they're radically different than both of yours. Shane McMahon and Daniel Bryan are going to get a B from me. The reason why is it seemed too easy, if that makes sense. Like, oh, we'll just a guy people really like and another guy that people really like, and moves his arms up and down every once in a while. And it just, I don't know. I mean, it seems like I can read through it and it's not going to be very complex. So I ended up giving it a B. And where you're really going to flip the table, I think, is Raw got a worse grade. They got a C+. And the reason why is, although I do agree that they have more potential for feuding, this honestly was totally skewed by their performance so far, which has only been like 2 shows. And it was just awkward. I didn't like it. It's felt weird so far between the two and their interactions. I mean, hopefully they end up conflicting at one point, but I oddly enough, I feel like they just threw Foley out there. It was like, oh, people like him, so that'll be good.
Well, I was getting ready to say with the whole like when he when Foley was saying the picking and and we found out it was Big Show. I think even Steph was like, "What the hell?"
I ended up. We actually a lot of times, me, Mike, and Pubin, we were texting the whole time throughout the draft. And at one point, I saw a tweet that said, WWE thought process was, oh, how do we get Mick Foley to get booed? Say the name Roman Reigns. Oh, there you go. So yeah, Mick Foley's a guy that's really hard to get booed, and that's how over he is. That's how much people really like him. And pairing him with Stephanie does create the potential for a feud, but I don't know. It felt awkward and weird.
Well, truthfully, though, I don't know, honestly, how much we're going to see either of the... I think the McMahons will be on TV, but I think that what we really need to expect is a heavy dose of Daniel Bryan and Mick Foley. I actually even think, to some extent... I don't know that they were like actually making picks, so to speak, because I think creative handled it. But I think like the fact that they were the general managers for their shows actually did play out in how WWE drafted this. Mick Foley is a huge Sasha Banks fan. He loves a number of the other wrestlers that came to Raw, and so I think like Daniel Bryan, a lot of the guys who got picked for SmackDown are guys who the internet loves, who just haven't gotten chances yet or need more. And so I think that while they didn't necessarily pick them, the fact that they were the general managers actually kind of affected what the creative team did.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, then we have that down. Obviously, I varied quite a bit from YouTube, but I think it seems that Raw in general most likely has the greatest potential if they were on camera going forward, together. So, moving on to the next one, we had Star Power, which is the main eventers. The big name guys that have been around and totally can draw quite a bit of merch and everything like that. So, first I want to start off with Puvin and see what he ended up giving to Raw.
Okay, so the way that I really approached this was I kind of did a round robin, and I identified the 5 top stars from each brand based on how I think the draft positioned him. So I had Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar, Chris Jericho, and Finn Balor for Raw, and for SmackDown, Dean Ambrose, AJ Styles, John Cena, Randy Orton, and Bray Wyatt. And then I kind of just would go around. So do I want to see Seth Rollins fight Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar, Chris Jericho, or Finn Balor in terms of freshness of matchup? So Raw got an A overall. There's nobody on Raw's top 5 that I don't want to see wrestle each other. SmackDown ends up with a B+, and the only reason why SmackDown gets dinged for me is that John Cena and Randy Orton are together. I know that they're probably not going to work a program together, but...
We've seen it enough!
Exactly. So, while I am still happy with the star power of SmackDown and think it's actually stronger than people give it credit for, I did have to ding them because I think that we need to wait at least another year or two before John Cena and Randy Orton get into any kind of physical interaction, and there is a potential for that because they're on the same brand.
Yeah. I say, well, my grade was pretty similar to yours, Puppet. I had Raw got the A+, and SmackDown got the B+. I think with the star, I think for me, like the biggest star, the two biggest stars that they got for me were Cena and AJ. I think that again, that could be a great rivalry. Isn't necessarily worn out for me because plus I love that hashtag beat John Cena. So I'm excited about that. Like again, Bray can have fresh rivalries with some people. As much as I think Alberto Del Rio is boring, he can still have good programs with people. Like I think perhaps maybe him and Apollo Crews could have a couple of good matches here and there, things like that. So I think SmackDown, the biggest thing that again they have going for them is potential. But then again, like you can't really put anything on potential until like it actually comes to fruition.
Yeah, the other thing that I want to say, and this is not necessarily storyline, but I'm just going to name a couple of guys from SmackDown. AJ Styles, Dolph Ziggler, Alberto Del Rio, Kalisto, and Apollo Crews. There is no matching of those 5 guys that I don't want to see. I will be glued to my television. I will watch those matches over on YouTube because they are incredibly talented in the ring. A couple of them have work to do in terms of character, personality, but those guys can go, and it's going to make for some fun television.
Absolutely, and that's where I have to give SmackDown quite a bit of credit there. There's a lot of great talent. For just moving on to like my actual grades for the two, Raw I ended up giving an A, so I had to kind of edge them out there. But then SmackDown I ended up giving a B, and that's just, I think truthfully when it comes down to it, that's just a numbers game, and I think Raw had like the sexier name picks nowadays for someone who's really into the WWE. Like the fact that they got Finn Balor was a pretty big deal for me, truthfully. So like that bumped him up pretty hard. Whereas the last pick for SmackDown was Bray Wyatt, where I love Bray and I think he can do some great stuff. I'm shocked he can do what he can do looking the way he does. You wouldn't think he'd be able to move the way he does, but he does. And yeah, which I think is great. Although Raw, I'm surprised I didn't actually take off more for having 2 part-timers, Brock Lesnar and Chris Jericho, but they're just that good, truthfully, that I still ended up giving them an A.
Well, so there's 2 things I want to say really quickly. One being that I think that we also need to think about the casual viewer, because that's what WWE books towards. And so while, yes, Brock Lesnar and Chris Jericho are names that they recognize, Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns have been investment. But if you are somebody who only watches the product casually, yes, the Shield's over, but like who Chris Jericho and Brock Lesnar are, who John Cena and Randy Orton are, so it kind of evens itself out in some ways for the casual viewers, which I think is something for us to keep in mind. The other thing is, so we all very clearly gave Raw an A and SmackDown kind of a B or B plus in that range. I think one of the things, and I like to play out the what ifs. If you flip-flop Finn Balor for Randy Orton, I think the draft changes tremendously in terms of your main event, in terms of what people are grading. So that's just another thought.
Sure. I think Finn Balor is definitely a huge pivotal piece in this assessment.
Yeah. Like I think Randy is kind of like the wild card. Well, not the wild card, but I would say I think he's like maybe a little bit of the double-edged sword a little bit. Like that can he can like add some stuff, but then at the same time like he could also maybe necessarily hurt it because like he's not one of those younger guys, and then like he has the potential to get stale again. So you never know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, so from star powers, we're going to move down to the mid-card, which a lot of times, I have to say, it's been what really drove me to watch the program. So we had a lot of different groupings here. I mean, Bubban, again, graciously put down all the mid-carders, although Braun Strowman in mid-card, I think he's so low tier, it's ridiculous. But but anyway, moving on to mid-card. Some serious drafting. Remember, Raw ended up with more picks here. So I'm going to start off with my grades first. And I'm going to say that I actually ended up giving Raw a B, and I gave SmackDown a B. Now, this is taking into account the fact that Raw had more picks. So I'm thinking on a per-pick quality, I think that SmackDown did really well in comparison. I mean, The Miz is a guy that probably shouldn't ever be the heavyweight champion, but outside of that, he is a hell of a heel that people tend to not like, and this movie star character has been pretty good for a while, actually. Baron Corbin, Dolph Ziggler used to be my favorite. Love him still. He can put on as good a match as anybody. Del Rio, man, but I know he's good in the ring. Kalisto is great to watch, horrible to listen to on the mic. Zack Ryder, all great. And then of course Raw, Sami Zayn, Rusev, Owens. Owens is my favorite guy in the WWE right now, and there's a few other names as well. But I think per pick, they both went toe to toe, and it was fairly evenly split. How about yourself, Bovin?
So I have them similar. I have Raw graded out as a B minus, and SmackDown at a B plus. And so there were a couple of reasons why I did that. One being that I actually do think that Raw has the stronger level of talent, but it also includes a number of guys who have been overexposed over the years, like a Jack Swagger, like a Mark Henry, like a Big Show, where I don't necessarily think that they don't still have value to contribute, but a large part of the audience has seen them for so long that it's no longer compelling. The other thing, and we talked about this a couple times already, is you only have so much television time, and so for some of these folks, they're going to Superstars or main event. They're not going to be seen on Raw, and so I think that on Raw, when it's 3 hours, there's an opportunity for them, the mid-card, to carry a little bit, but they're also now in very strong competition with the women's division, the cruiserweight division, and the tag team titles in some regard. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of people who lose out. On the flip side, SmackDown, it feels light, but they have the same number of main eventers on SmackDown, and so those guys are going to be taking up a decent amount of the segments, and they're also going to be able to bring up somebody to kind of jump to the kind of tier of the main event. So Dolph Ziggler, Del Rio, Baron Corbin, even Apollo Crews are going to have times where they can work with somebody like a Bray Wyatt or a Randy Orton or maybe even an AJ Styles. That's going to help elevate them a little bit. And like I think everybody said, they're going to have less people to fight through. And so they're also hungry, and I'll talk more about that when we get to the veteran conversation. I want to say one last thing and then turn it over to Mike, which is, this is a tangent, so I'm just warning.
Yeah.
Braun Strowman. I'm going to tell you why it was genius that he went to Raw. And this is what I would do if I was a WWE executive. I would do the same thing with Big Cass. I would tell them immediately to spend the next year with Big Show behind the scenes and learn how to work as a giant, because that is what both of those two are missing. And so yes, Braun is very young and very green, but he has an amazing look and he is a legitimate giant, and if he learns to work the giant style and can learn from the Big Show off screen, there's money to be made there. I love Big Cass. The only knock I have against him is that he does not work like a 7-footer, and that's because he's really athletic. But if they ever want to do split up Enzo and Cass, which I'm not necessarily a supporter of anytime immediately, but eventually, he has to. He is. If Vince wanted them separated, they'd be separated right now. But if he wants to be a marketable solo act, he has to learn how to work as a big man. Eventually. So I would send both of them to sit under Big Show's learning tree for the next year, because for all the flack he gets and the fact that he's been overexposed, he is a tremendous athlete and he knows how to work the giant angle to a T.
You know what I found out today? Just an interesting fact.
Mm-hmm.
That Big Cass is not 7 foot. He's smaller.
He's probably like 6'11". They overbill all of them slightly, so.
Yeah, I found out today that he's actually shorter than 7 foot, and I was like, Enzo, you damn liar! You've been saying this for a long time, and I feel misguided.
I also want to call into question whether or not Enzo is in fact a bona fide G. I acknowledge that he's a G, but I'd like to see the certification.
Certified G.
I need to see the licensure on that. Thank you.
All right, Mike. How about you, man?
I was going to say, not too much different from you all. I gave them both a B. I was going to say because, again, like similar to all, like everybody has said, like for me, it's just like for someone like Cesaro, it just kind of says like again, you're basically like, this is what we kind of think of you. Like, we don't necessarily see you going any higher because I don't see those opportunities really happening on Raw as much. We're supposed on SmackDown. Like, even though I'm not a fan of the Usos. I think that could be a good team to really help out, like either American Alpha or even like the like Ascension for something like that, because those guys were decent down at NXT and they just got completely bulldozed and turned into the Brooklyn Brawler on Raw. Like I think there's again there's great potential on SmackDown. I know I keep saying that there's great potential there, but like again I think like I said there's just there's more room to breathe for these superstars to kind of find their grooves and kind of make those mistakes and make it and then come into it. As far as Raw, like I think the margin of error that the superstars kind of have for that growth is going to be very limited because it's the flagship show.
Sure. And I have to jump in and say that as far as like in the mid card, if we talked about earlier a value pick overall in the first so many rounds, I have to say, like, based off of the booking for this past year, Zack Ryder accomplished way more than I ever expected, and he was kind of far back in comparison. So he may end up being one of the guys that benefits the most from all of this, and he went down pretty low. But
I would not be surprised, though, if he becomes a hype bro immediately after this for at least a little while. I think that was very intentional that they were sent to the same brand. One other thing, and I know we got to go, so I don't mean to cut you off, Kevin. I think this is another example of where one switch between the two people, like between the two brands, would have changed entirely how people saw the perception. So if Baron Corbin ends up on Raw and either Kevin Owens or Cesaro goes to SmackDown, people would not have shut up about how strong SmackDown's mid-card is. I think that it's really one person, like one spot that kind of flips it. And so just a thought there. But overall, I think that we all agree they're pretty even, with me giving the nod to SmackDown slightly.
And I totally agree with you, sir. All right, on to tag teams. Because actually, Mike mentioned this earlier. He was talking about the Usos helping out. So, of course, we have to delve into the tag team division a little bit here. So, two different brands that actually picked a similar amount of tag teams. But I'm going to kick it to Pavan over here and figure out what exactly did you give as a grade for Raw in this category?
So Raw definitely, I think, takes the category for a couple of reasons. The biggest being that the New Day, Enzo, and the Club kind of all end up together. And if you were to really look at the tag teams going into this, I think that it's pretty well established that those are the three top tag teams. They also get some veterans in the Golden Truth, the Dudley Boys, and the Shining Stars, who have all been on the roster for quite some time. I think the Shining Stars, whether or not...
Who? Who? I'm sorry, you mean Los Matadors? Who?
I'm talking about the guys who've been on the show for 5 years. And so despite the fact that they're not well established, they are veterans for the company. And so I think that that's the one weakness for Raw, is that they end up, after the top three, there's a pretty big drop-off. I also don't know how long the Dudley Boys will stay the Dudley Boys and not be split off. Going over to SmackDown, I gave them a B-. Obviously, the strength of their division is American Alpha and the Usos. I actually think the Usos are an incredibly valuable pick because they can work with any of those tag teams. I think the issue that they run into is that the Ascension and Breezango, to some extent, have to be rebranded as non-jobbers.
That's right. Breezango's coming for everybody.
Well, that comes down to the booking.
Kevin, I want to jump in here real quick. Like, I think Raw has, I gave it an A, obviously, for the star power, and SmackDown got a B, but I would say I think SmackDown has the ability to have better matches and possibly storylines with the tag teams, and I think Raw just clearly has, like, that star power, because again, I mean, you have Big Enzo, and you got Cat, you got the New Day, and you got the Bullet Club, but are those all teams that can all kind of work? Like, well together and have great matches. I would say I don't really know how confident I feel with Luke Gallows and Big Cass constantly tearing it up in the ring.
Not at all.
Versus like yeah, you know what I mean. Versus like like Mr. Jordan and like Jey Uso or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and I just want to throw out there, as far as the show, we have about 15 minutes roughly left in the show. We have a lot of stuff we're going to cover. We're going to finish up, of course, our grades here, and then we're going to go into Battleground a little bit, do a kind of a quick preview for that, and who we think probably is going to win each of the matches. So we're going to kind of glaze over for the rest of them. Although we do want to spend a little more time on the women's division, since that is a very hot button issue in the world of wrestling in the past year or two. It's gone such great lengths from where it was to where it is. I mean, even the title belt is just significant to that. So, as far as the grading goes, I want to dive right into it, and I'm gonna throw it over to Mike. Between the two brands, which do you think ended up getting the higher grade based off their picks?
Well, I mean, clearly leaps and bounds because the future of Mrs. Davis is on the roster of Raw. Miss Banks, I think that pick alone gives Raw the A grade for me.
Oh, yeah.
I think also picking Charlotte, and Charlotte was picked at 3 or 4, whatever the number was. I think that picking it, and you had touched to it earlier. I think picking her that early said, okay, we're trying to take the women serious now, and by doing so, and we're taking one of the top ones, and in the top 5. So like I think that like I'm very hopeful that they can get the women they're gonna take it serious. We won't get these 2-minute matches that really don't mean anything. We're actually gonna have storylines and great matches because like I said, Sasha is just killing it. But like I will say, I do think this will give Becky the opportunity that kind of like Sasha had when she came over to Raw. She can actually kind of carry basically the women over in SmackDown because I don't really necessarily see anybody who has that same level of star power that Becky does. But I would say there's potential for Alexa Bliss to at least get somewhat better as well.
Okay, how about yourself, Evan? What are you thinking?
I have to ask you the question that I think all of America is wondering, which is, what is your top best Glee song, Kevin? Because I don't know for anybody who's looking at the screen, but that is one of the tabs currently open on Kevin's Google Chrome page, I guess.
Looks like Puvin's got a Mike Saber for a hater. Oh my God, back off it. Glee was awesome back in the day, and I decided to reminisce, okay? Sometimes I reminisce about Glee, then I do a hardcore WWE podcast. We don't have to hate, man. It's all supposed to be about love. Puvin!
Did you break out the acne scrub, too? I'm just kidding.
Oh, wow.
I'm not done getting through puberty. Joke's on you. Go ahead. What are your grades?
I'll keep
in the words of Morrow, it's lit.
I'm going to keep it quick. I think that Raw very clearly was a stronger women's division. I think ultimately, again, I'm left with questions about the title picture. What are they going to have 2 championships? Are they going to have one? I think that it's great that Becky has been moved over. I think Natalya is a really strong pick. I think Naomi is incredibly athletic as well for SmackDown. I think Carmella has tremendous upside, but very clearly Raw wins this category. And the lingering question of the title picture is the most important thing that I see.
Absolutely. Okay, it's great. And for me and my picks, just to say real quick, I ended up giving a Raw an A because it's very clear they had superior talent, and they brought up some younger talent as well. I mean, Dana Brooke has already been up here, but hasn't really done anything other than follow Charlotte around like a chicken. And then we have Nia Jax, who hopefully can break out. I'm curious because I wasn't sure she would be ready to come up, and she still may not be, but she does bring something different and a different look. So I like that there.
Kevin?
Yeah.
I have a quick suggestion. I know that we're running low on time and we want to hit Battleground. Rather than trying to go through the rest of these categories, do we want to touch on maybe 1 or 2 things from the remainder of the list and then move over to Battleground?
Yeah, well, that was the plan. Yeah.
Okay. If you
Are there particular ones that you would like to hit, Puvin?
There's only one, and then I think that like anything else that people see, it's the last one on here. I don't think that this would be something that a lot of people would rank around, but I know that it's incredibly important to everybody on this podcast, which is the diversity of the brands themselves. And when we say diversity, I think we're talking an international presence, the people of color on the brand, and et cetera. There's a lot of things that could fall into this, although we're also limited by what WWE has under their umbrella, and so there are some identities like transgender or some other things that currently aren't on the roster, and so we're limited by what they have.
Darren Young.
Yeah, well, actually, I was going to touch on that. Darren Young being the only out superstar. This category is actually stunning to me, mainly because when SmackDown started to really have a product of its own, it was powered very largely by individuals of color, international superstars, and Raw flat out smashes SmackDown in terms of diversity on their roster. And there is some overlap because obviously people of color and international stars can somewhat overlap, but international stars for Raw, there are 13 people who could identify that way, 14 for people of color, and the only out WWE superstar. On SmackDown, there are 3 international stars and 7 people of color. Obviously, SmackDown is a smaller brand, but even proportionally, that does not work out, and I'm very stunned by how that played out. Obviously, it's also a sign that WWE's locker room is getting more diverse, but still has some work to do there in terms of growth and establishing main event talent, as the overall main event talent tends to still stay Caucasian, truthfully.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. They did. I mean, that's just fact. I mean, Raw definitely smashes them in that category. I know they tried. Well, no, they didn't really try to be representative. But if they're a smart business, which they are, they should be to some degree because being able to identify with these characters and these athletes is, I think, at times important to a viewer. So important there. Okay, so actually, the last thing, I'm sorry to skip over you there, Mike, but I don't know if there's much more to say about that one, truthfully.
No.
But I just want to say, since we had an overall grade, what did you give the overall grade for the brands, so we can get on that real quick?
So like I said, I actually factored this out and did the actual grade point average. So SmackDown had a B average overall with a 3.17. So obviously a report card you'd still be proud to take home to your parents. And a B plus average for Raw with a 3.58. Like we've talked about throughout the evening, SmackDown still has a tremendous amount of potential, but it's all about turning that kinetic energy into potential energy. And so I think that they have the opportunity, but if you're grading it right off of what you see, there's no way that you don't give it to Raw, but acknowledge that SmackDown has potential.
I think that sums it up for me.
I also did the online grade point average thing. I ended up with a B plus for Raw and a B for SmackDown. It matches up pretty much perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's pretty much our grades on the overall draft that went down. Obviously, you probably have some conflicting stuff. If you have any differences, please leave it down below in the comments. We want to hear from you, and we'll do our best to reply back and try to figure out what exactly you thought about it and why. All right, so we want to move on from there, though, because although that was a huge deal in the draft, that's going to be talked about for a long time in the wrestling world, we want to move on because there is a pay-per-view that is coming up. It is going to be Battleground. That is a pretty big one that is upcoming. Although, actually, you know what? I'm going to dive back real quick. I have to touch on the awkward interviews that happened during SmackDown on the WWE Network. 2 in particular, I think. One is from Kalisto, and another is from Cesaro. I want Mike to talk about Kalisto real quick.
Thank you so much, God. That was painful. Okay, Kalisto made the great Khali look like he looked The Rock cutting that promo. Okay, good Lord, it was rough. I mean, I was like, first he was. I mean, I get that people get nervous and they stumble. But at one point, I was like, "Is he even coherent? What is going on?" It was just awkward and bad. And I would say, I mean, honestly, unless he worked with someone maybe Cena or AJ, I would say keep him away from the mic.
I think Heyman just got a new client if he plans on having a future.
The
Oh
only
my
client that
God.
Paul Heyman has ever had that he's going to be taller than. And I love Kalisto, so I'm just saying that. I also want to say for a second, how dare Mike disrespect the Punjabi Playboy?
Oh my god! I think the
man.
last thing I saw Khali do was a dance off against Fandango.
Which I'm sure he won.
He did.
Uh,
Anyway, okay, so that was awkward interview number one, but awkward interview for me at least number two was Cesaro, and not that he couldn't speak; it was actually quite good. And actually, he went as far as talking about that in his interview. But it was like I don't know if it was like a work shoot or not, but it seemed like there was a whole lot of genuine speech coming from that interview where he's like, well, like I guess I'm on Raw now, but I'm being kind of buried and I'm overseen. I was picked really low, and I deserve way better, and people don't give me the opportunity to speak, even though I know 5 languages. I can talk. I promise you. And everything about it, like for me, it was even at the end when he said, "Well, I guess I'm on Raw," and then he did this awkward lean out of camera frame that felt very like not planned. It felt like it came like from the soul. But that was just me. What are you thinking about it, Puvin?
I think he hit the nail on the head. Truthfully, I don't think it was scripted because typically with the network exclusive stuff, there's a lot more kind of flying by the seat of your pants. But I think it was real, and I think what we may have just seen, and it depends on if WWE is smart enough to capitalize on this, is this is a heavy thing to compare to, but I would call this Cesaro's pipe bomb in some ways if they embrace it. He very clearly was
Mm-hmm.
upset. You can't say that anybody on the roster can wrestle better than him. There's
No.
clearly this belief that he doesn't necessarily connect. And so him saying, I can connect, just let me go, and why the hell are we spending so much time talking about the GMs when people, nobody tunes in to watch the McMahons. And so I think he said it, and I mean, the last time we talked about this, we talked about the authority and that kind of conflict being overdone, and I think he said what a lot of people were thinking. And so I think that if they embrace it, he could have just lit up his way to jump to the top of the mid card, if not into possibly the main event. But this all comes down to whether he really pissed them off or not. But I think I'm proud of him for saying it. Who really knows?
he seemed pissed for real.
Well, Daniel Bryan's also like his best friend, so maybe you wanted to go hang out with him.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I agree. I think it was great stuff, and that's something that could absolutely catapult him toward the top. Now, we do have Battleground. We're going to go a few minutes over here so we can talk about this real quick. We have the matchups that are going on. Right now, it looks like we have quite a few listed. If I have the card right here, it looks like we have some kind of highlight reel segment with Jericho and Randy Orton, which is going to be some kind of conflict inevitably. We have Becky Lynch versus Natalya, and The Miz versus Darren Young, which it's fascinating that's the Intercontinental Championship matchup. And then even more fascinating, Rusev versus Zack Ryder. And this one arguably is going to, well, it's not going to be the match of the night, but it's probably my second most anticipated match, which is Charlotte and Dana Brooke versus Sasha Banks and the mystery partner, which we alluded to earlier, but we'll talk about who that may be. Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, New Day versus the Wyatt family, Cena, Enzo and Cass versus the Club, and then finally the triple threat match, the Shield triple threat match, which probably is a little bit early, but regardless, it's happening now. So let's just, real quick, let's go to the bottom. We'll actually go with Becky Lynch versus Natalya. What do we think the result is going to be, you two? We'll start off with Mike.
Becky has to come out on top. Like, she has to win that match.
Okay, what about you, Pavin?
I think that honestly, I thought going in that Becky would win, but the fact that they both ended up on the same brand tells me that this could go a little longer. So ultimately, I actually think that Natalya wins so that they can stretch this feud out slightly.
See, I have to admit, I'm fairly fascinated by that. Like, I agree with the thought process. The logic is there in what you just said, Pubbin. But
Mhm.
for me, I have a hard time because I think Becky Lynch needs a win. Like,
Yes.
she's been kicked around, and like they keep like she was the first pick for SmackDown, if I'm not mistaken, as a woman. And
Yeah.
like, I would hope they wouldn't pick they wouldn't make their top female pick lose to Natalia, who like no matter what, she's credible because she is the Hart background. So I don't know. I think
Well, but
Becky Lynch is going to win.
that's I'm going to tell you that that's flawed logic for two reasons. One, this is wrestling, so on any given night, one person can beat another night. Two, we all are projecting Sasha Banks to beat Charlotte at SummerSlam, which is the number 2 pick beating the number 1 pick on Raw, which is exactly the same as Natalia beating Becky Lynch, who was the number 2 pick, I believe, as a female, over the number 1 pick for Becky Lynch. So, like, I don't think it's that.
But Charlotte hasn't been kicked around this whole time. I mean, Sasha needs the win in that scenario, just like Becky Lynch needs this win. Natalia's not going to realistically become like women's champ or anything.
Well, but I don't
Well,
think that Becky's going to not get the win back. But I think that because they both ended up on the same brand, the feud will not end yet. So it's possible that Becky Lynch wins, but the feud continues. But I think that Natalia ends up getting the win.
But I would say too, man, like Becky doesn't have any like memorable either win. Like her like when people actually think of Becky, they're just like, oh yeah, wasn't she one that tapped out to Charlotte at WrestleMania? Like she doesn't have any major win. Sasha can say I've never been pinned on Raw. Charlotte can say she's the champ. Like Natalia, she was sporting like that was her gimmick like a year and a half ago. So I think to me, Becky has to win this match.
Well,
Absolutely.
but here's the question for me right now. SmackDown obviously has just built their division around young talent. I don't. If you're going to tell me who the top 2 like women's wrestlers are going to be on SmackDown, it's going to be Becky and Natalia. And I would actually argue that maybe Natalia needs the win. You're the one who just said, her gimmicks over the last several years have not been great, and they're finally utilizing her. So
Well, I
yes,
was getting
Becky
ready
Lynch.
to say, no, like I think once the program's done with Natalia, honestly, I think Becky should move into a thing with Naomi. I think honestly, Natalia should basically be like Jericho, where she's just putting people over.
I think that she deserves at least one more run because there's still money to be made off of Natalia. She's way like yes, we have the 4 horsewomen, but I would put her up with any of them in terms of being able to go in the ring.
Well, yeah, absolutely. On ability, she's up there with anybody. Absolutely. All right, so after the women's matchup here, we're going to go with the Intercontinental matchup. We have The Miz facing off against Darren Young for the IC belt. Now, Darren Young's gained a lot of traction recently, and Miz has been an awesome heel that he is. That's when he's at his best, frankly. So, in this matchup, who do you see coming out on top, Pubbin?
Again, one that I can go either way on. I think I did say the biggest thing for me is it depends on how much they're going to play with this draft piece and like the 2 brands jockeying. I'm going to go for the upset and say Darren Young wins because I think that they want a moment where SmackDown looks like it's almost championless. And so I say Darren Young takes the title.
Okay, how about you, Mike?
I honestly don't know because here's my thing. So if you have Miz lose, to me that kind of hurts like his most recent push. But then at the same time, like you're trying to push this Darren Young, let's make him great again, and now he's using the crossface chicken wing. So I don't really know. So I'm honestly I'm anxious to see how they're going to let that one play out.
Okay, I'm jumping in. I'm all aboard the Darren Young train. Woohoo! I think he's going to get this one. I think it's not going to be decisive by any means. I think it's going to be some fluke, just like him being in this matchup in the first place, to further go along with this Bob Backlund decrepit. You just got to believe in yourself, blah, 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 blah. And I think he's going to win it. I think he'll drop it the next pay-per-view, but I think he'll win it for now. All right.
Yeah.
The next one, because, I mean, there's no more to be said. Final word on things. Kevin, that's his name. Boom. Next matchup, we have, for the U.S. Championship, we have Rusev versus Zack Ryder. Zack Ryder's been making a lot of noise, and Rusev Rusev is trying to recover from that horrific League of Nations gimmick. Now, it's really bad. All right, so this is a weird one to handicap, in my opinion, but I'm going to throw it out to Mike and try to get a feel. Who do you think is going to come out on top this pay-per-view?
Well, honestly, okay. So you have two guys here who basically the booking has hurt them. So if you go back to Mania, no one saw Zack Ryder winning except for you, and then he loses it the very next night. And then you have Rusev. He was tearing through everybody last year until he ran into the buzzsaw that was John Cena, and now it looks like he's trying to gain that traction again. So I would say for me, I got to go with Ryder.
Oh, we got a broski over here.
I got to go with Ryder. I think Rusev can still rebound from the loss because of the tear he's been on. He looks like he's in better shape now. He's just killing it. I think having Ryder win says, okay, we're kind of taking him seriously.
Okay. What about you, Pavin? What are you thinking of these two?
So I'm going to hedge my bets a little bit here.
I'm
going to give you I'm going to give you the pick that I'm going to live with. I think that Rusev will win, but like I said before, I think that they're going to do the switching mid cards on us, and so I'm going to pick Ryder winning to do that. But honestly, I think that Rusev should win, but because I think it makes for a more compelling pay-per-view, I say Ryder.
Okay. I'm going to go against both of you on this one. I have to go with Rusev. And the reason why I'm going with Rusev, as much as I'd like to see Ryder win, I think the reason why Rusev has to be picked is Rusev, like I was saying, is recovering from that horrible period in his life known as the League of Nations. And in order for him to get back to that monster heel status that he was at, I think he needs to beat a guy that the crowd loves, like Zack Ryder, that they believe that he needs to win. So I think Rusev beating him just goes like, you know what? Damn, Rusev sucks, man. And I think this will help get him closer to that. So I think Rusev has to retain until they find someone better to take the U.S. Championship, and I don't think it's going to be Ryder. All right, so from there, we go on to the women's matchup. Now, I was going to put in my pick first, but here's the deal. You have Charlotte and Dana Brooke, been together for a little bit at this point. Shocker that they're paired together. But you have against the boss, Sasha Banks, and a mystery partner. Now, at this point, it seems like we can assume that the mystery partner may be someone new. Because usually they don't pull this unless they're doing some kind of big reveal. Now, throwing out to Pavin, because he alluded to it earlier, who do you think the mystery partner will be before you give your pick?
I'm going to give you the answer, and then I'm going to pull some gimmick infringement, so give me a minute to run with this. I believe that it will be Bayley. And so Kevin and I enjoy another YouTube channel called What Culture Wrestling, and so I'm going to steal one of their gimmicks. If they sue us, Kevin owns the intellectual property to all of this.
Hey, I mean, I have it on record. Pavin said there's something intellectual about me. That's a change.
That's true. And deficient didn't follow. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to say WWE book this better. Here's how I book it. You have Bayley, you have Sasha come out, introduce her partner, Bayley. You get this tremendous reaction. Obviously, Sasha and Bayley go over, and you get this amazing moment where Stephanie McMahon comes out and says, Bayley, obviously we made a mistake. On Tuesday, you very clearly helped beat the women's champion, our number 3 pick. I am so happy to offer you a contract to Raw right now. And right as she's about to give an answer, Daniel Bryan's music hits, and he comes out and says, Stephanie, that's a great question to ask Bayley. And that's why I asked her that this morning when I bumped into her. And you know what her answer was? Yes.
That's really good.
That is really good. Yeah, but you're giving a lot of faith to the company.
Well, let's be honest. It could be Naomi too, but I'm booking with my heart because as much as a Team Bad reunion will sell to Vince, I think Triple H is going to get on his corner and just say, Vince, This is one of those things that you think is going to work, and it's going to not. So, yeah.
I think we're closer. Like, although Bailey sounds great, there's a better chance we may get like Santina or something.
Oh, God.
Oh my gosh.
I'll tell you, honestly, the reason why I believe it's Bailey, besides me just wanting it, is obviously the NXT chatter was Bailey very heavily. But one of the things, if you watch the coverage both on SmackDown and the network, is when they were showing the Performance Center, they never had a clip of Bailey in it. And I think that that's because they wanted people to not see her that night. I think that this also, bear with me, I think that this gives them an opportunity to actually position Bailey better because she wasn't part of a 60-person draft. Yes, you can talk about the draft as a kayfabe thing in terms of being important, but would you want to be part of 60 people who are just positioned, or somebody who gets their own moment on one of the biggest pay-per-views of the year because it's coming after the draft?
All right. Okay, so then just real quick, if you believe it's Bailey and Sasha versus Dana and Charlotte, who do you believe wins?
It's got to be Sasha and Bailey. I think no matter who the partner is, I think Sasha comes out on top to help force the match at SummerSlam that everybody wants to see.
Okay, so Mike, you think that they're going to end up winning. Do you think it's going to be Bailey as well?
I think it's gonna be like here I'll rephrase that. It better be Bailey. That's what I think. It better be, or because like we said, if it's Naomi, if it's someone that we don't even see coming, like Victoria's coming back out of retirement or something, like I'm gonna be pissed. So it better be Bailey.
Okay. All right, for me personally, I do agree. I think that whoever Sasha's paired with, I think they're going to end up winning. I think the logical conclusion at this point is it has to be Bailey. I agree with both of you. I mean, otherwise, like, why would you exclude her from the draft, not talk about her at all? And I don't know. Like, it seems like Sasha has an uphill battle as far as the story goes. I mean, Charlotte's been fairly flawless. So I think adding Bailey's star power will help. It'll elevate Bailey while also elevating Sasha at the same time to make a totally legitimate women's champion. So I agree. But on to the next one. We have Sami Zayn versus Kevin Owens, which is guaranteed to be an incredible matchup in the night. And, you know, I'm going to kick this one off. These are two people that, although I have to admit, I don't understand the appeal of Sami Zayn, but I love it. Like, the moment he appeared when Bret Hart was like, hey, it's Sami Zayn, I lost it. His theme gets me jazzed up, his energy, everything. His work is great. And then you have Kevin Owens, who I've said it before in the last podcast. This guy is just an A-plus heel. I mean, he extends it all the way down to Twitter. Incredible work. Everything you give to him, He knocks it out of the park as a bad guy. He's awesome. So in this matchup here, these two have been going at each other for quite a long time. Inevitably, this probably won't be the last matchup. If I had to give a winner, I'm going to end up saying that actually I think Sami Zayn's going to take this one over KO. And I don't think there's a lot of great reasoning other than I think ultimately KO has to come out on top between these two. And Sami Zayn will move on to something good as well, and so will Kevin Owens. But I think for this one, I think Zayn's going to take it. How about you, Mike?
I got to go with KO, man. I think, speaking of, like the awkward backstage promos, Owens also seemed a little pissed, and that seemed somewhat real. So, like, I think he's going to take out his frustrations on Zayn. So I got to go with Owens.
I do think Owens was on the wrong brand, just to add in there as well.
Absolutely.
So, exactly. It should have been his. Pavin, how about you, bud?
This is another one that, like, I think that they are booking for this to be the climax of this particular feud. Obviously, that this is always there, so they will go back probably eventually. In the event that they had been split up on brands, I would have felt 100% positive that Sami Zayn would have gotten the win going into his new brand. The fact that they stay together actually confuses me more in terms of what happens. For me, it's almost a coin flip scenario. I say Sami Zayn ends up winning it basically because he needs the win more than Kevin Owens does. I think that there's a way that you book this match to where Kevin Owens looks amazing, Zayn pulls it out in the last minute so Owens isn't hurt terribly, and then maybe Owens gets that opportunity to get pushed up on that lower tier main event scene after this, even though he loses from benefiting from being in a great feud. But I think that Sami Zayn on a coin flip pulls this out.
Excellent decision, mainly because it agrees with me.
I'm cursed and I know it.
All right, we got the tag belts up for grabs here. We got the New Day versus the Wyatt family, which for me this is a really weird, funky feud that's going on right now, and it's honestly even weird for me to kind of predict. But fortunately, I'm going to go last on this one. I'm going to ask Pavin, who do you think is going to come out the winner in this matchup here?
Oh God.
Exactly. Yeah, there you go.
Well, so I finally actually sat down and watched the epic clip that is the Wyatt compound. And I think
no!
It's so bad.
The thing that I have found most interesting is Xavier Woods has brawled with every single member of the Wyatts, including Braun Strowman, and been made to look like he could actually do that.
Oh yeah.
Honestly, I think that the New Day wins, and it's because the Wyatts stop existing after this weekend. I think that the New Day gets the rub. They're going to stay together, so why not put them on top? You don't have to have Bray take the pinfall, so have it be. If I'm doing it, I have Rowan take the pinfall, maybe even sow in some seeds of discontent where Braun's like, I don't have to listen to you anymore. Obviously, that they're not. You don't usually see that much like character work from them in that regard.
No.
But I think that the New Day takes it because there's not a bunch of benefit to giving the Wyatt family a win if they're not going to be together the next night.
Agreed.
Yeah.
How about you, Mike?
I just want to see the New Day break the record because, I mean, again, no offense to Paul London and Brian Kendrick, but, like, no.
I was like, that sounds like a lot of offense to me, buddy.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Well, just to throw it out there, I agree as well. I think New Day takes it. It's perfect timing. The Wyatt family can break up here. There could be some issue at the end, some weird, messy finish. I definitely think New Day is going to end up winning as well.
Quick thing, I will say that I think that the Brian Kendrick is a sleeper to make a deep run in the Cruiserweight Classic as the guy who everybody's rooting for. So I know that we just kind of jumped on him a little bit, but don't be surprised if he wins a match or two that he's not supposed to in that.
Sure. He's a name.
Spanky!
All right, so we have a six-man match here. We got Cena and Enzo and Cass versus the Club. All right, this one, I think there's a lot of face star power on one side, and then there's a conflicted face on the other side, in addition to two bald guys. So, who do you think is going to end up coming out on top for this one, Mike?
Well, I think this is another case of the match, like I talked about. I think the Club needs this win simply because once it's split up, like I think Gallows and Anderson need something to say, like, okay, AJ's not with us. We actually have something. Oh, by the way, we beat Enzo and Cass, because up to this point, I don't think they've been booked as strong. Particularly when AJ was necessarily when it was that in between, like, is he with the Club, is he not? So I think those two in particular kind of need something to carry them, and I think Enzo and Cass can kind of survive that because they're so over with the crowd. What are you guys' thoughts?
Well, I'll jump in and say that I actually think that Enzo and Cass definitely, I think they need the win right now. I mean, I know they're going to be over still, but if I remember right, they've taken a few losses recently that they probably shouldn't have, truthfully. I've always predicted them to win. And plus they have Super Cena on their side. I think that he's gonna help propel them to the win. And also, kind of like the Wyatt thing Puvin was talking about, this is possibly a good way for them to split off. Like, if we have, I hope they don't start off this way with Balor and the Club, but this would be a good thing to say, like, you know what, we're losing, AJ, So maybe we need to go find someone else to lead this crew or something. Now that the brand split has happened, so I think there's potential for it, even though not necessarily that's going to happen. What about you, Pavan?
So, Kevin, I'm going to say this, and I want to explain it fully. I don't think I've ever heard you be more wrong in anything that you've ever said.
Wow.
And I said you were a good guy once.
Oh, yeah, that's true. So the reason why I say this is I don't think that Enzo and Cass need this win at all. Win or loss, they are they're untouchable. Yes, they need to win occasionally, but they are over. And so you don't need to mess with this. So I think the smack-talking Skywalker runs into the Samurai Master and AJ Styles knocks him out. I think the club goes over. I think it's weird because this is the exact opposite of the logic that I use for the Wyatts. But I think that both the club and AJ need wins going into their respective brands. And I think that Enzo and Cass and Cena all can take the loss. And I think that Enzo specifically takes the pin.
You know what the problem is, Pavan?
You had an opinion?
There's only one word to describe you, and I'm going to spell it out. S-A-W-F-T, soft!
You know, the sad part is I contributed to your education, and that's how you spelled that.
How dare you, sir? Okay, all right, pretty great there. But the finale of the entire pay-per-view, this is the reason why everyone is watching and everyone's shaking their head in disappointment that it's happening necessarily. But we have the Shield triple threat with Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins, and that dude that got caught by the doping police. Roman Reigns. Who do you think is going to end up on top in this triple threat match featuring three guys that not too long ago we were seeing just totally take over the WWE as a unit, now individually? Mike, who do you think is going to end up on top leaving the building with that title?
Well, it's definitely not going to be that guy with the needle. So, I'll say, so for me...
Brock's not on this show.
I'll say, yeah, so for me, I think Ambrose is taking it simply because I think that is the way that can help SmackDown kind of take some of the lumps off that they've been perceived to taking because of how the whole draft took out. So I think, yeah, they could be like, yeah, well, you may have like these, you know, like all of the bigger names or, you know, like whatever, but we still have like the heavyweight champ. So I think Ambrose walks away.
Okay, what about you, Pavan? How are you thinking about this?
So I'm going to pick with my heart, but actually, oh, God. So the one thing that I love about how they've booked this, particularly in the last 48 hours, is the inclusion of both Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns being on Raw. And so going into this match, obviously Dean Ambrose and Roman Reigns, they aren't going to work together, but they haven't, like, neither of them have turned on each other. But so now you have this other element of Roman Reigns trying to take the title back to Raw and have this kind of brand thing playing out. I think Dean Ambrose wins, but I will not be surprised if Roman Reigns ends up costing Dean Ambrose the title and turning, because I think that they need to figure out what to do with Roman, and this is a great opportunity to turn him heel right now, and not immediately then have to get a payoff versus Dean because he wouldn't be able to fight him anyways. So there's this ability to kind of leave that sitting for a little bit. So I say that Dean Ambrose wins, but I'm not surprised if Seth Rollins walks out either.
Well, I was going to say, Puppet, now you were saying to turn Roman, did you mean turn in another failed drug test or actually turn him?
Uh-oh. Okay. I'm just going to jump ahead because I think Pubbin, that was a dead end. Okay. So, you know what? I actually really loved what Mike said about this one in particular. I enjoy, like, I feel like there's, since, you know, Reigns and Rollins are on the same brand together, I feel like you can work a little bit more with that. But then immediately I jumped to what Puppin was saying about the idea of Reigns finally turning, which I think this is the time to do it. Now that, like, he's kind of disgraced for the drug testing. I think it's really easy. I mean, everyone's not on his side anyway, but this is even more so. It's like, okay, we have solid foundation. He's a bad guy, other than we just don't want him in our faces all the time. So take that and run with it. Like, find a way to cost like Ambrose the title or something like that, or try to at least. Now you have Rollins in there. I don't think he can leave with it, but ultimately, I'm gonna say I think Ambrose keeps it, because for the possibility of elevating on SmackDown while Rollins and Reigns, kind of duke it out over on Monday Night Raw. So I'm gonna have to say Ambrose leaves with it, and hopefully a Reigns heel turn. But I just don't trust them to do it.
I was actually really hoping that we would somehow end up each choosing one of the three combatants, but obviously it didn't work out that way. The one thing that we didn't mention, and I know that we're closing it out, but congratulations to the announced teams too. They didn't do it in the stupid draft format.
Yeah.
Significant improvements to the commentary booths in ways that I think that we're all going to look forward to.
Great, man.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, I think it was it's a nice fresh start. I mean, if there's a time to do it, now is really it. So I think they nailed it on that.
It is difficult for me to ever give a compliment to somebody from Pittsburgh, but Corey Graves is pretty good. So
that's right. You better take it.
For everyone out there, Mike is from around Pittsburgh, so yeah, that's why he has that obnoxious pride in that that awful city.
But you know what's real funny though? Real quick, you know what's real funny? Puffin, the guy that won my team championships is from Ohio.
Ah, yeah, it's Roethlisberger, right?
That's true.
He's from Ohio.
Anyone on that roster from Philadelphia by any chance?
I don't think so.
Like any athletic trainers, water boys, anything?
I mean,
probably the last 7 guys cut for conduct reasons.
Man, we already can, it's amazing. Almost anything we can say, we can double back to Roman Reigns. It's incredible. All right, so you know what? We're going to wrap the show up there. We did go over by roughly a half hour, but you know what? When planning this out, we wanted to go an hour because, we're new to this and doing the spacing. But to be fair, we just had a major event happen, which is the brand split, and we're trying to talk about an upcoming pay-per-view with some pretty good matchups. So you know what? Maybe it was unrealistic, and I hope you enjoyed the extra half hour of content anyway, more than we planned. Hopefully we weren't too boring, and we were able to give some pretty good insight for all of you, and definitely want to hear about it below in the comments. If you have anything that you want to say, please leave it there. But we're going to try to get some kind of regular podcasting schedule up so that we can let you know when we're going to be doing this. We're going to fancy up the page a little bit so it doesn't look really dull and like we don't care. We absolutely are into it. We're just starting out and want to try to find ourselves and our identity, just like the new SmackDown Live. All right, so that's going to do it for this podcast. Thank you so much for watching, as always. I want to have my compadres here to say goodbye. Any closing words, possibly?
We're taking over.
Mike?
I would just say, did you all know that Cesaro debuted in 1999? And he's won the tag titles 9 times?
He also weighs approximately 280 pounds.
Yeah.
Wait, did it
we
say
learned so much.
Did it say where he was from on there too?
Wait, hold on. I think I have the screenshot because I sent it to you all last night there. What said he was from? It does not say where he was from.
Okay, I was expecting it to be from Dudleyville. So.
I'm surprised. That just seeing that, I was thinking the whole time. I was like, man, this is ripe for anyone wanting to make a Melania Trump plagiarizing joke. Oh. If Cesaro goes on there and says, as a young female from Dudleyville, this hurt me greatly. I would have lost it. All right, so we're going to close on that note. Always got to throw in some politics to this. Thank you so much for watching, as always. Again, we're looking forward to breaking down some wrestling for you, and inevitably we're going to do a recap on Battleground the next week, probably the night after. So check out on our page for that. That's going to do it from our broadcast here, the 3-Man Power Trip. I want to say thank you again for listening. Have an amazing night, and goodbye to you.
See y'all.